Hey, Mary.
Morning.
I don't see Kacey yet.
I think she's up in Mandy's old office. I can go
Oh, she
knock on
is.
the door.
Okay,
Okay,
excellent.
I'll go see her. So Jessica,
She all good?
so Kacey's there, and she said for some reason she hasn't been let in.
Oh, now I see her.
Okay,
I walked away.
that's okay.
Sorry, Kacey.
All right.
Sorry about that. I didn't see you, and then all of a sudden I walked away, and there you were. So,
Hey.
oh, the fun of Zoom.
For sure.
But you've done this before, so I think it's not a big deal.
Yeah. Let's get the hang of it.
Let's see. I need to make you a co-host, and Mary, I'm going to make you a co-host too.
Okay.
So then everybody should be able to have control over all kinds of stuff, and we won't worry about that. So excellent. So Mary, did we make the decision? Are we stopping at the end of June and going to restart later in the year?
Right. So our thought is to do something, either we're going to call it Tuesday at 2 or Tuesday at 10. And we'll do a hike with a naturalist kind of thing. We're trying to come up with a catchy title, just like the other group was. But, the idea is it's not a hike, it's more of a casual walk, so people don't feel like we're going to do a 10-mile walk. We're going to actually just stroll around these grounds and look for butterflies or spiders or flowers or whatever, and probably about an hour and a half at the most. And I think, when we get done with Kacey's program, maybe do a little bit of a, hands up, what do you think? Is 10 o'clock better for people, or is 2 o'clock better? Just because some people are morning people and others aren't. So, and then once we get kind of an idea of what people prefer, then we'll set it up, and we'll have the topics listed on our website, so people will know in advance what it is that they're going to be looking at or concentrating on. Not that we'll ignore everything else around us, but maybe just focusing a little more on one area of nature than the other. So Kacey, have you had a chance to load your slides?
Yep, I have got everything ready.
Okay, oh good.
And a bunch of skulls in here with me too.
Oh, that's great.
I don't know how well my camera will focus though on stuff, so.
Okay, so what I'm going to do, Mary, is I'm making a poll so that we can, if you were to come to an educational stroll at Riveredge on Tuesdays, which time would you prefer?
Okay.
And then we can go that way. So you had 10 a.m. or 2 p.m. And is that right?
Yep.
Or either, I'm going to put, or either would be fine. Okay. Cool. There. So that's made. So when you're talking about that, we can, I've lost you guys on my screen. We can go ahead and I'll launch that and we can see. So
sure.
Yeah,
so
that's fun.
Is it your opinion that it's better to ask them in the beginning or at the end? Do you think we lose people as time goes on?
Yeah, it's either way, right? Because at the beginning they just slowly keep adding. True. And then at the end, after the presentation is done, you're right, some people go away. Right. It's kind of both. So maybe we should try it at the beginning, depending on how many people are here.
Sure.
But can you give, when you introduce that, can you give some ideas as to what like the topics could be for the different days? And
Sure. Yeah, it'd be
um,
nice if they could even suggest some. Is there a place for them to do that on the poll, or?
just in the chat, they could
Oh,
type it on the chat.
that'd be good.
So yeah, that would be good. And then do we want to commit to a certain month, like later in, October or something, to going back to, or November maybe, going back to something like this? Or
Yeah, I think so too. I think as the weather gets colder and, there isn't as much to see outside, that it would be great to start it up maybe even by the middle of October already, or the 1st of
Yeah.
October, whatever seems to be a good time for, October's still good for a lot of the fall colors and fall wildflowers and, what are the insects doing to get ready for winter or whatever. But yeah, it'd be good to start it up, so people are kind of thinking in that direction as we get into the colder weather.
yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Yep. I'll just kind of be here I'll say good morning, but then I'll just turn it over to you and
Okay.
Kacey, and I'll just be here for support, and I'll launch that poll whenever it seems appropriate.
Okay.
Ed's joining us. Is Tammy.
Hello.
Good morning,
Hello,
Ed.
Ed.
Hi there.
Ed, are you going to be in charge? Oh, I didn't pause the recording.
Glad you guys could make it. So today we're going to be focusing on mammal skulls, just because they're something that are very easy to identify once you know some of the tricks and tips, and also just because they're just so fascinating and interesting with some of the adaptations and features that they have on them. So I'm going to be sharing my screen in just a moment here. I've got a PowerPoint that I want to share with you. All right, we're gonna do this from the start. Okay, so hopefully you guys can all see that. And if you have any questions at any point or any comments, things you want to share, please leave it in the chat button. And I'm going to be opening it up at the end too. So we're going to be opening up in the end. So if you want to ask any questions there, you're more than welcome to. So mammal skulls are one of those things that maybe at one point you found in your life outside, or just bones in general. And they've been, they've fascinated humans for millennia. There's ancient bones that have been found with carvings in them, and people have been collecting them, not just for research, but, for cultural practices for, centuries. I don't know exactly how I wound up to be so good with skulls. It was by pure accident that I found myself just having quite a knack for it. But today I'm gonna just be showing you I'm not going to go into like full detail with, all of these technical terms. Really, I'm just going to be going through group by group, different animal, mammal, mammalian groups. And then underneath and underlined, there'll be just one feature that you can really, really look for. If you're ever interested in identifying skulls, there's lots of books out there. But today I'm sort of teaching you to look at the overall shape and an overall distinguishing feature to look for in terms of mammal skulls. All right. So why mammals? They're not as delicate as other skulls. And there's, especially with the jawbone and certain features, they tend to fall apart less, they stay together a much longer time in the field. And the great thing is, with mammal skulls, you're usually able to get to the exact species. There's a lot of great guides out there, but also sometimes bird skeletons, between like sparrows and things like that, they can be a little bit difficult to differentiate. But you can get pretty close if you know what you're looking for. So some overall mammal skull traits, these are the sort of things that make a mammal skull. We only have one jawbone. So if we're looking at a skull, we have the top part, sort of the cranium and where the eye sockets are. And then we have the mandible, the jawbone. And for mammals, it's one bone. If you look at like a snake or other creatures, sometimes it's more than one bone, and that's what causes it to fall apart quicker. We have a lot of great developed cheekbones. The technical term is the zygomatic arch. And really what makes a mammal skull is our chewing, our grinding, our biting capabilities. And so you see a lot of those features in the skull itself. We have an upper palate, so you can feel that with your tongue. Some other animals don't usually have that, so we are able to breathe while we're eating, a great advantage. And this basically means we have different shaped teeth for different jobs. This is not true for all mammals. If you look at like a dolphin skull, their teeth are all very similar, cone, sharp shape. But many mammals have, you know, incisors for snipping in the front, canines for piercing, molars in the back for crushing. So different shapes allow us to eat different foods. So these are some of the terms that there's some technical terms here, and then there's some terms that you might be more familiar with. I will often use more of the general term today, but just some couple great words to know. So I might be referencing the eye socket. I might be referencing the cranium, which is where the brain is being held. The nose, which is the rostrum. Mandible, which is the jaw. And zygomatic arch, which is the cheekbone. And this you can't really see very easily in this picture here, but underneath the skull for certain animals, and I'm going to stop sharing for a moment to show you this. This is, if you can see, on either side of the skull, there's sort of looks like a little round bubble. And this is a bone called the auditory bulla. And this is an extension of the ear, and it allows sort of like an echo chamber, a resonating chamber, to make the sounds louder for that animal. So ones that have really strongly developed auditory bulla, or that bubble underneath, tend to be stronger hearers. It's not always true, but it's a great feature to look for when you're sort of trying to guess what figure out what the animal is. Oops. I'm gonna start sharing the screen again. I'm gonna be switching back and forth a lot. Okay, so one major thing you can look for overall is the jawbone and the teeth, because like we talked about, a major characteristic, a major feature of mammals is they're eating lots of different foods. They have adaptations for chewing, grinding, shearing, all of that. So when you look at the jaw, for a carnivore, typically, they've got these strong canines, and even as you go further back, their molars are going to be a lot more sharper. For an animal that might have a little bit more of an omnivore diet, maybe more like those like coyotes, or sometimes they occasionally eat things other than meat, they might have a flatter back molar. But even as you go further and further back, compare that to an herbivore down here, where pretty much all of their back teeth are very, very on the flatter side for that grinding motion. Omnivore, obviously, they're plant and meat eaters, so it's going to be a little bit of a mix. Sometimes you've got some sharper teeth in the front and some flatter teeth in the back. And for the insectivores here, obviously this is a category within carnivore, but I'm going to be talking about them a little bit later with our shrews. And one cool thing, they also have these very, very sharp sharp teeth even as you go further back. But they also have these really cool sticking out teeth. We call these procumbent teeth. And they almost work like little tweezers. So if you think about an insectivore, eating little bugs, they want to be able to pick them off something, or, pick them out. And so they have these two teeth that really stick forward, that you can notice on that animal. So I did mention a bunch of teeth before, but in case you don't know your teeth, or just need a little refresher, incisors are those snipping teeth in the front that we use to bite into a crisp apple. Canines are, we have these as well, but they're very poorly developed, but they're used for gripping prey if you're a carnivore. Sometimes for certain animals, they like primates, they might have large canines to more as a display, to sort of say like, hey, look how intimidating sharp teeth are. So they're not necessarily using them for eating meat, but it's more of a display purpose. As you go further back, you get to your molars. And these are kind of, tend to be grinding teeth, but depending on the animal. And so we got the premolars and the molars. We're not going to be talking too much about premolars today, but I might mention some of them as a feature. So if you find a skull, one cool thing to look for, just as like as a first off, other than the jaw, other than the teeth, is your animal, the skull that you found a predator or prey. So one thing that I sometimes like to rhyme with, eyes on the side, probably to hide, or not always hiding, but a prey species. Eyes in the front, probably to hunt. So if you look at a field of vision, where the eyes are placed on the skull, an animal that is looking out for predators, they tend to have eyes that are more placed towards the sides of their head. So they almost have a full field of vision. They might have a blind spot, in front of their nose and directly behind them, but if they have a much wider field, a much wider range. For an animal that's a carnivore or somewhat of an omnivore, their eyes tend to be more forward face. That gives them what we call binocular vision. So we're able to put those two images from the right eye and the left eye together to create a depth field. So we can tell exactly how far away something is. I have something cool to show you over here. This is what I did for back this past winter. So I rolled up some pieces of paper and placed them into the eye sockets of these two skulls. So over here, over here we've got a deer, and I've placed those paper tubes into the eye sockets, and you can see how they're going off to the sides. This sort of just extends that field of view for us to see a little bit easier. And over here we have a carnivore, and those, papers are sort of extending a lot more forward. So it's a really cool way to sort of visualize that, because sometimes when you're just looking at the skull and they don't always have a full eye socket, it can be a little bit tricky to tell, but it's a great way to sort of demonstrate that. All right, share screen again. Okay, so is that working? Yep, and for primates too, there are a lot of herbivore primates. They need that binocular vision more for depth perception when they're, in the trees or from climbing and jumping. Recognizing faces is extremely important for primates. So to be able to do that, you need that depth perception. So one great thing to know, if you're ever interested in really, really keying out a mammal, a lot of mammalogists use these things called dental formulas. So sometimes if you have like a mouse or, like a tiny little herbivore and you're like, you have no idea because they're so small. Sometimes the distinguishing feature, if you don't have the fur, if you don't have the rest of the body, sometimes it might be a difference in teeth. So one thing that mammalogists will use is they'll use this formula. So, how many incisors do they have on the top and how many incisors do they have on the bottom? How many canines on the top and bottom? Premolars, top, bottom. Mammals, top and bottom. So you can see on the sheep, they really don't have any top incisors. Those are completely missing. They don't have any canines. And then you might be able to count as you go further back. Versus a carnivore, which has, this is 3, well, it's 3 on one side, I should clarify. So it's 3 on whatever half of their face. And then 1 canine on that one side. Doesn't mean they just have 1 canine on their whole upper palate. So that's a good idea to know if you're ever interested in making it more, getting down to the exact species. One other great feature to look at when you're IDing skulls is figuring out, if they're a biter or chewer. Bones are really, if you think about them, a reinforcement for the muscles and the movement of our bodies. So, when you move your arm, the muscle is pulling along the bone to pull that arm towards you. So when you think about, the movement of the jaw when an animal is biting or chewing. So for an animal that's more of a carnivore, they're having more up and down motion, right? If you put your hands on your temples and sort of feel like right in front of your ears and just open your jaw and close, you'll be able to feel that muscle that's going from your jaw all the way up. Now, if you're a carnivore and you're a really, really good biter, that muscle will extend all the way to the top of the head And sometimes it'll even, certain animals will have a crest on top of their head, and that's extra reinforcement for that muscle, that up and down motion. So they might even have like kind of like a bone mohawk, and that's going to be a spot where that muscle can really, really hold on to and, you know, fortify that movement. For an herbivore, they're going to have more side-to-side motion, right? They're grinding. So if you feel the sides of your jaw and you move it from side to side like that, you're going to be able to feel that muscle, the masseter muscles. So that if you look at an herbivore skull, they tend to have this huge area down here, much larger space on that bottom jawbone, so to help that jaw muscle move and to have a better space for it to move. So that's one feature, a couple features to look at as well. All right, so I think, yeah, so overall, you know, we're going to talk about some specifics with some of these skulls, but really, really thinking about, why is the skull the way that it is? Why does it have this teeth? Does it have this teeth for shearing or grinding, piercing? Does it have this crazy crest on top of its head? Probably it's a good biter. Sometimes you might see holes in the skull. These are for nerves to move through, maybe for like whiskers or different sensing features. So just sort of thinking about overall, like, you know, there's usually a reason why that part of the bone exists. Okay, so we're gonna dive in to just groups of mammals and talk about what makes them special. So this is an opossum skull, and it is the only North American marsupial. There are other marsupials in South America, but these ones are, you know, they're pretty distinct. One thing that you'll notice is they have a pretty small brain case. So you'll see kind of, if you can see my mouse right here, it sort of looks pinched right here. And then compared to some other animals, just a pretty small space for that. Not the most intelligent animals, but they're survivors for sure. Older animals might have that head crest, like I was talking about, for that biting motion. As the older they get, the more pronounced it will be. And so here's my underline. And like I said, the underline is really the takeaway, like the one defining feature that I tend to see or look for. They have more teeth than any other animal in North America. So 50 teeth. I mean, I think there might be more in fish or something like that, but for mammals, 50 teeth. No other mammal has that many. And one overall, just like generalized thing that you can look for is they sort of have a stretched, or especially like what I talked about with the pinching right around the eyes there on top. This is the top view of that skull. One kind of way that I relate to it, if you've seen Beetlejuice, and that moment where the movie, where he sort of stretches his face back to sort of look a little bit more scary. It always reminds me of a possum skull, because it's just like, it looks like someone has just sort of pulled it. But that's the way that I remember. Okay, so moving on to the next one, bats. This is one that I didn't include in my last PowerPoint because I wasn't sure if I was going to have time. They are very cool. Their skulls are very, very delicate. They're almost see-through. But you're not likely to find them because they are so delicate. Really, you might find them if they've died in your attic or in the walls of your house, and then you have like the whole skeleton. But you're not likely to find it outside. They have a large and high brain case. They have this steep slope on their nose. So I almost think it looks a little dog-like. But one other defining feature is they tend to have this notch in their nose. You can see that here, and you can sort of see it here. This is not true for all bats, but the bats that tend to not have them are ones that don't live around here. So we're talking like fruit bats or flying foxes down south. All right, deer. These are pretty easy to identify. Just like with the sheep, they have no upper incisors, no canines. Sometimes they might have antlers if they're a boy. There have been cases of females with antlers, or they might have the root of an antler. We call these the pedicels. So sort of just like the bumps on top of their head where the antler will grow from. And they have a fully formed eye socket. So a lot of these skulls that we're going to be looking at today, you know, we have fully formed eye sockets, so we tend to maybe think of it as the standard. But a lot of animals, they don't have a full ring around their eyes. So deer have that, and a couple of our ungulates have that. Oh, and one cool thing is you can often age the deer by their teeth and how they come in. All right, rabbits. Many people think that rabbits are in the same group with rodents. So they're actually in their own group though. They're in the group called Lagomorpha, which includes rabbits, pikas. What you can see here, what makes them, one of the defining features that puts them in their own group is if you look behind those front top incisors, they actually have two little peg-like tiny incisors behind that. So that, along with other features, puts them, you know, into their own group. Because really with beavers, rats, mice, it's really, you know, two top and two bottom incisors that sort of stick out for that snipping action. One of the other noticeable features with rabbits is it looks like someone has just stripped away the bone around their nose. It seems very exposed. So it sort of looks like a netting or a lattice on the side of their nose. It's thought to possibly help with cooling of the blood vessels. You know, rabbits are runners. They need to be able to cool down their bodies as they're running, and that is thought to aid in it, but I'm not sure if it's quite confirmed. And one other small feature is they have a very short upper palate. You might not look at that as much, but it's just like barely, it's almost like a bridge. It's just a little strip rather than like a full, you know, palate going all the way back. Moles and shrews. So these are those insectivores that I was talking about earlier, where they have those, you know, procumbent teeth, those teeth that stick forward because they're using them like tweezers to snip at those insects. They have overall very long skulls, but for the moles, they're going to have a very, very skinny cheekbone. It's still there. It's just very, very slight. And you'll notice that their teeth are pretty much on the white side. For a shrew, they also have those insectivore teeth. They have no cheekbones, so never developed. You know, sometimes people might think they might have broken off if they found it in the forest. They have a very round brain case. One thing you'll notice though is their teeth are on the reddish side. And we'll talk a little bit more about red teeth when we get to our rodent section. But yeah, these are some of those insectivores. All right, so squirrels, rats, and mice. Over here on this picture, you'll see, you know, kind of all of them next to each other. The biggest distinguishing thing is going to be size. You know, squirrels are much larger, usually on average, but sometimes you might find a younger juvenile squirrel. But one major defining feature for the squirrel group, is that they have a sharp point above the eye. This is the supraorbital point, and I have a squirrel skull here, and you can see that point too. They're very sharp, and that's really only in the squirrels. So if you find a tiny skull and you're like, is this a rat, is this a mouse? Only the animals in the squirrel group are going to have that sharp point. They tend to have a broader, rounder nose. And this squirrel group for today also includes the chipmunks and the woodchucks. So woodchucks are in the squirrel family. Woodchucks are also known as groundhogs. For rats and mice, they tend to have a flatter nose ridge, and it can be tricky with the rodents, but if you just want to get it to the general group, you know, they're not going to have that sharp point, and they're going to be much smaller. All right, voles. These are also animals in the rodent family. But one thing that you're going to notice, unlike a mouse skull, mouse and rat teeth, they're going to look a little bit more like our molars in the back, you know, more rounded. They have those crowns. Moles and muskrats, if you look at their molars, it almost looks like little prisms, little triangles on the side. And you can see that down here too. That's going to be the main thing that's going to help you differentiate voles and muskrats from those other animals, and muskrats from beavers, which we'll talk about next. And they're pretty angular, you know, they're not as rounded. They've got this sharp, you know, sticking out point on the back of their jaw, and just very sharp features, in my opinion. All right, so here's the beaver. And one thing I want you to notice, because sometimes people find muskrat skulls and they think of them as beavers, check out those prism teeth, those triangular teeth, and then check out the teeth of the beaver here. You can see how much they're, I don't know, like more like folded cloth, folded towels. So they don't quite look like the muskrat teeth of that group. They're gonna be obviously much larger, much more built, big old cheekbones to help reinforce those muscles of the jaw. And they have their eyes, if you'll see here, this is their eye socket where my mouse is right here. It's pointing up. So if I put, you know, if I folded that paper again and I put it in there, it would peer up above their head. And as aquatic species, you know, that makes sense because they're in the water a lot of the times. They might be looking out for predators and sort of poke their head above the water to look. So that's a great feature for them. So one thing that you'll notice with a lot of these rodents, as I go back, is you'll see kind of this reddish orange teeth. And that is quite common in a lot of different rodents. And that's because, as you know, rodents are gnawers. Their teeth continuously grow. They're front incisors, I should say. So even as they're gnawing down, it'll continuously grow in from the back. But also, their teeth are reinforced with iron. So you think about it, you know, they're gnawing all day. They have to have these really, really strong teeth. So they have iron that gives them that reddish orangish color in their teeth to help make their teeth strong enough for their daily activities. They're kind of cool. So canines, and I've split this up a little bit. Canines, coyote, dog, wolf, and we'll be talking about foxes in the next slide. Overall, canine characteristics, they have that very long nose. And that you see in foxes, you see in coyotes, minus certain dog breeds, obviously, because we've, you know, bred some pretty weird shapes into our domestic dogs. One thing you'll notice, unlike some other carnivores, is they have a flat back molar. That can either be for crushing bone. Many animals, you know, like wolves, they'll be crushing that bone as they're chewing their meal. Sometimes it can be also because of a more omnivorous diet. So, you know, certain canines will also partake in, you know, plant matter, fruit and things like that. So, yeah, it's different than, you know, maybe a feline that we'll talk about later. They sometimes will have a head crest, especially bigger or older animals. My friend has a Great Dane, and as you're petting its head, you can feel the head crest. And like I said, that's just a strong bite. And they tend to have very wide cheekbones that really stick out. Distinguishing between coyote, dog, and wolf can be difficult, especially if you've just found a skull. Usually a great indicator, well, if I've skipped this, but if it's got like a really deep bridge, like, you know, deep forehead, it's got a little bit of a forehead there, and if it's got plaque on the teeth, it's usually a dog. Because dogs, you know, they've grown up around humans and they've eaten a lot of sugary things, and their teeth are going to get terrible as they grow older. But with coyotes, their teeth are very, their canines are very long. So if you look at where my mouse is here, their canines go past, you know, you see those little dots on their chin. Those are holes for the nerves for their whiskers and just different nerves. It really goes quite far versus a dog and versus a wolf, which really just goes down to, you know, the bottom gums. For coyotes, they've got a very long, narrow palate, long, narrow nose, flatter nose. The wolves have larger teeth in proportion to their skull size. Wolves are just super built. Like you look, you know, they're taking down huge, large prey, and so they have these just, you know, just massively built features compared to if you look at a dog or a coyote. But it can be difficult. You know, there are hybrids out there, and And, you know, there are dogs that have very, you know, wolf-like shape or quite, you know, there's just a lot of crossover, but those are some pretty good tips. All right, so for foxes, foxes are, you know, they're going to be smaller. They have a very dainty, slender nose. And they also have these really long canines that go past the chin. But one great way, so there are gray foxes and there are red foxes in Wisconsin. They're actually not quite closely related though. If you look at the canine family tree, gray foxes are much further back on that canine family tree. They're not quite as closely related as to some modern canines. Gray foxes, if you look at the top of their skull, they have the crest that's more like a U. You can see that with my mouse there. And the teeth are smaller. They have a weaker jaw. The fact that this is a U-shaped crest means that it is a weaker bite overall. And their back molars are going to be more flat, because they have more of an omnivorous diet. They're using more of those back molars for some different grinding things. Red foxes, they have that V-shaped crest, so a stronger bite. And they're going to be a little bit bigger usually, but you know, sometimes you can find different aged individuals. Okay. Bear. These are pretty hard to misidentify. They are enormous. They have very flat molars. The canines are just more stubby. They're not quite sharp like some other maybe specifically carnivores. They're more like a little bit more blunt. They have really large cheekbones and this broad nose. If you've seen a bear with all the fur and the skin, you know, you can know that they've just got that huge honking nose. And one cool feature, this is found in other animals as well, but it's so much easier to see with these bigger animals. They have these what are called turbinates. And if you think of like a turbine, there's sort of these spiral lattice-like work of bones inside of their nose. And I'm gonna stop sharing for a moment so I can make sure that you guys can see this. But this is a bear skull from Riveredge. And I'm gonna turn it around and I want you to look inside of that nose there. And you can see sort of that intricate structure that's inside of that bear. And that serves a couple purposes. So it is, like I said, found in other animals. But what it's doing is it's creating, making sure that the air is moist as it comes in. A lot of animals that live in really cold, mammals, I should say, mammals that live in cold areas, like a polar bear, you know, they need to warm up the air as it enters their body so that they're not losing their body temperature. So it'll sort of improve the moisture, but it also creates more spaces for those sensors, those sensory receptors for smells. So they're better smellers. They created like all of this they've increased the surface area inside of their nose, so to say. Now we have turbinates as well. Humans do. They're just really, really simple. They're not quite interesting to look at, but we do have them. But the more elaborate the turbinate structure inside of an animal's nose, often they're really, really good smellers. So that's a great way to tell a feature of the animal just from the bone itself. All right. So mustelids, and I'm using this term because this is I'm overall going the weasel family. Weasel family includes minks, martens, fishers, otters, badgers. Not going to go into every single one of those, but some overall weasel family features are they have just a really long skull, just a long brain case, long auditory bulla, which are those ear bubbles, and then they have that rounded nose. They have really sharp canines. Sometimes they might have a head crest, especially if they're older. They have really, if you look at where my mouse is, their cheekbone is just super curved. It's very, very bendy. And they have sideways back molars. That's what I like to think of it as. So if you look where my mouse is there, a lot of these mustelids have what it looks like. You know, it looks like someone's just shifted their back molar to the side. And you can see that on this mustelid as well, where it looks like it's just been shifted. Now, skunks used to be in the mustelid family. Before we had genetics and DNA testing and all of that. They are quite similar superficially. However, one great thing to look at is they have a really, really broad, flat nose. And I've got one up here. And from the top and from the side, it looks like someone's just sort of flattened it like that. And compare that to, like, you know, this mustelid here, this is a fisher. You can see how much flatter it is from those different angles. And also their nose bones tend to fuse as they get older. So if you look at this one here, you can see sort of this suture line, this line down the middle. And for an older skunk, it's just gonna look like a solid bone. It's gonna look like one bone altogether. They have much weaker canines. They have thinner, less curved cheekbones. But like I said, it can be tricky. Back in December, I kind of got goofed. We had all these skulls laid on the tables, and I was like, wait, what is that one again? But my biggest always thing, like I said, it always looks like someone just like pressed their hand into the skull and made it flat. All right, raccoon. Overall, a really, really rounded, smooth shape. Even the jaw is super rounded. And one thing that I always notice is it looks like it could just rock. Like if you put it on a table, some animals have really flat jaws and they're gonna sit very stable on the table. A raccoon, if you set it on the table, you could push on its nose and it's gonna rock back and forth. Canines are they're more stubby. They have those crushing omnivore molars. They have a pretty small head crest, but they might have one. And they're really, really common to find. This is one of the most common skulls that I find. A lot of times when I look on like skull forums, because of course I'm on skull forums and blogs, people are always posting them. I'm like, what is this? And it's just, I don't know why. Raccoons are really common, but it's one of those larger animals that just, I don't know, people find them a lot. All right, felines. This includes our domestic cats and our bobcats. Overall, feline characteristics is they have a round, squat skull with a short nose, not many teeth. So if you open up the jaw, they don't have a lot of teeth. And even their back molars are sharp. That's because all of their teeth are specialized for the eating of meat. These are animals that don't really diverge from that carnivorous lifestyle. They have a very tight movement of the jaw because they're not doing that side-to-side motion. It's only that up and down motion for a carnivore. And almost a fully formed eye socket. Not quite there. There's still a little pinch where they don't connect. But in terms of differentiating bobcats versus a cat, obviously bobcats are going to be larger. They have larger canines and canines that go past the chin. So here's that bobcat, and you can see it goes way down there. Cat, not so much. And bobcats tend to have more of a sagittal, that crest on top of their head. It's a U-shaped often, and as they get older, sometimes those ridges can come together into a single ridge. I've seen that before, but usually it's more U-shaped. So I don't think we have time for mystery skulls, unless there's maybe a time at the very, very end. I was hoping to show you some, but it looks like we've got only about 10 minutes left, so I want to leave some space for questions. So yeah, I'm so glad that you guys were listening. I know it was a lot of information all at once, but it's something where, once you get the hang of it, and once you stop looking for the little details and just take a wider picture of, what does the jaw look like? What are the cheekbones? What is the overall shape? It's quite easy to pick up, and it's kind of fun. So thank you so much for listening, and I'm going to open it up for your questions because I would love to answer them.
Great job, Kacey. We really enjoyed it. Learned a lot of different things, a lot of good tricks. So we'll look at some of the things that are in the chat, and it seems, first of all, do you have any good reference books? What would you recommend if people wanted to really delve into this further?
Yeah, so my reference books tend to be a little bit more in depth. There is like if you I don't know a lot of books that are just like general mammal skulls, but this is my favorite book. not favorite in general, but my favorite book for animal skulls. It is literally called Animal Skulls. It's by Mark L. Brock, and I find it very useful. But one great book that I find in general, I know we're in Wisconsin, but one great book for mammals in general is called The Wild Mammals of Missouri. There is a Wild Mammals of Wisconsin book, which is also very good. But I continue to use this one, even though I'm in Wisconsin, because there's a lot of crossover. But it really, they explain things really, really well. And not only do they have like information about the animal's life history and features, they also really go into some skulls and some interesting, characteristic features to look for. And this is by Charles Schwartz, and I've had his editions for years, and I really enjoy that. But if you guys have any other recommendations for more simpler guides that are more, introductory friendly, feel free to leave them in the comments. I tend to go super in depth, so I don't know about some general guides, so I apologize.
So they look very thorough. Yeah, the only one I know of is the Peterson series, but it's not strictly just on skulls. So, that might be a common book that people might be able to pick up at the library or the bookstore or whatever. Cool. All right, let's see what else we have in the way of questions. People really like the information that, you shared about the difference between the red and the gray fox. Well, what about the function of that sharp point on a squirrel skull?
That is, once again, reinforcement for the movement of the jaws. So they, squirrels have a very open eye socket. And when, I think it's to make sure that the eyes sort of stay in place in the skull as they have these giant jaw muscles that are moving back and forth right behind the eye. So that just helps keep that muscle in place and out of the way of sort of the eyes. I'm pretty sure, yeah, that's what it's, that's its purpose.
People are really fascinated with the nose of the bear too. So do other animals, including dogs, have that terminate inside the noses? It almost looked like the cat's skull that you showed had it.
Yeah, like I said, the better the smeller, the more likely they have to have those turbinates. Yeah, dogs have them. This fox skull. It looks like they've been, sometimes during the cleaning process, they sort of pick that area out because there's a lot of stuff gets stuck in there. Yeah, cats have it, dogs have it, bears have it, a lot of animals have it, but like I said, the better, ooh, this is a cool one. This is a jackrabbit. You can quite see that in there.
Wow.
But
very cool.
Yeah.
So first of all, where do you find your skulls? I mean, is there a source that you purchase them from, or do you just go out kind of scavenging in the woods and looking for them?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously you got to be lucky in terms of finding skulls in the wild. Sometimes you can look close to the water. A lot of animals, for whatever reason, they go close to water before they die, probably because, they're already like super, they want to be close to water so that they can stay hydrated as they're ill or, lethargic and dying. And so yeah, you tend to find bones near water. Sometimes after a recent burn, you can go looking for bones because that area has been cleared a lot of the vegetation, and it's easier to find some of those animals that have been caught in the prescribed fire. But yeah, in terms of online, Bone Clones is a great website where you can not only get real bones that are, but also replicas from different animals that, obviously would be super illegal to get, or extinct animals. I have a skull that I bought from Bone Clones that's from a Tasmanian tiger, which is my favorite animal. So yeah, it's a great place to buy them. There's also like different sites, but you just have to be super careful because there are a lot of regulations, especially with endangered species and crossing over state lines. So just be sure to know your laws in terms of, certain species.
Really good advice. I know we purchased, Riveredge did, the rabbit skulls that we have they are artificially made, but because rabbit skulls tend to be really thin and they break very easily, and so we decided to get the replicas. That way we wouldn't have to keep replacing them so often. But,
Yeah, that's smart.
so if you were going to, you know, if you found a skull in the wild, is there a good way to clean them?
Yeah. So I don't recommend bleaching, and I don't recommend cooking. Some people put it in a pot and boil it. That's really going, those techniques sometimes that are passed along really kind of destroy some of the integrity of the skull. But what I do is, so it really depends how much meat is on it still. Some people like go full out and get like domestic beetles and stuff like that. You really, if it's not a hobby of yours, there's no reason you need to get beetles. For some, but if you want to let nature help you, you can put it in like kind of a net covering where bugs and ants can still get in, but other animals can't scavenge it away. And so you can put it outside in an area and have it covered, and the ants will sort of do a lot of the work. That'll help get some of that gross stuff off of there. One other thing you can do for cleaning skulls, if it's already sort of pretty much clean, but maybe it has a little bit still on it, you can use soaking it in water and using a toothbrush, and then also like putting a little bit of hydrogen peroxide in there. Not all hydrogen peroxide, but that will help whiten some of the bone and, you know, get a lot of that bacteria out of there. But one of the best techniques is kind of gross, but pretty much, you know, the bacteria in our saliva is really, really good at breaking down protein. So one thing that I have done in the past is gotten a bucket of water, put that skull in there, and just spit in it, because the bacteria will break down some of the, you know, the organic pieces of it. And then eventually, you know, I'll put the hydrogen peroxide in there. There's a lot of different techniques out there, and it's really up to your comfort level, because it can get kind of gross sometimes. Obviously, during the cleaning process, don't keep it in your house, like put it in your garage or your shed or something. But
so true.
Yeah.
The smell can be incredible. Wow. Anybody else with other questions? Anything about skulls you'd like to share? So you'd have to unmute yourself perhaps if you've already done that, and we haven't unmuted you. All right. Well, thank you, Kacey. This has been really exciting and fascinating, and really good tips for all of us that find these things in the woods and would like to know what they are, or perhaps the difference between one critter and the next. The little hints you gave us about, you know, whether it's a predator or a prey, you know, we're all going to be trying that with the cones made out of paper. That's a really good kind of visual for us. So if you want to stop sharing your screen for us, and we'll just one more time ask people, if you haven't already done so, to like type in the chat again, whether, you know, if we do these Tuesday strolls, whether you would be willing and interested in strolling out here, just, you know, a casual walk, focusing on whatever's happening in nature. But is 10 o'clock in the morning better for you, or 2 o'clock in the afternoon? That would be helpful information for us, just to get kind of an idea of what time of day people prefer. The other thing we're going to mention is that next week, Sharon Schaefer is going to be joining us, and she is a hydrogeologist, and she's going to be kind of sharing her knowledge of the history and the geology and some of the cultural aspects of the Milwaukee River Basin. So all of us are probably in the basin, and certainly should know more about it, and Sharon is an expert, so we're going to find out what, you know, what's happening in our basin, which is important information for all of us. So join us next week at 10 o'clock for the Tea and Topics. Again, we will be starting the strolls probably right after the 4th of July, so whatever that Tuesday is, and continue those throughout the summer, and then in the fall pick this Tea and Topics back up again when more folks will be indoors and perhaps don't want to be outside when it starts getting chilly again. So again, thank you all for joining us today. Don't forget to add your information about what works for you. And we'll see you next week, I hope. And thank you again, Kacey.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Thank
Have
you,
a great
Kate.